22 한반도 국제평화 포럼 통일부가 주최하고 코리아 연구원이 주관하는 상호의존적 평화와 번영을 위한 과학기술과 자원공급망 재편 세미나에 참석해 주신 여러분들께 감사의 말씀을 드리겠습니다. 오늘은 세 분의 발표 그리고 두 분의 토론으로 진행이 될 예정이고요. 혹시 오프라인으로 참석하신 분 이외에
And thank you very much for coming to this event today. We now have offline participants as well as online viewers. If you have any questions as online viewers, please check the View More button on the screen of your site so that you can relay your questions to all the speakers as well as discussants. Then your questions will be answered accordingly. Now we have our welcoming speech by Mr. Chun Sang-jik, Chairman of the Institute for New Korea Initiative. Give him a big hand, please. Good afternoon and very nice to see you all. The world we are living today in this planet is riddled with unexpectations, such as the war in Ukraine and the COVID-19 and the pandemic for the last 3 years. The whole world is now suffering the fatigue. At this juncture, we are now having this conference for the reorganization of science and technology and resource supply chain for interdependent peace and prosperity. Welcome to all the participants, both online and offline, and thank you for your support. We say that the human history is that one of the struggle. Likewise, we are always seeing the human history intermixed with the conflicts and confrontation. Nevertheless, we also saw the progress of the human society so far. That is the reason why we are expecting that future competition and struggles can be our force for future development. And we can also make progress by overcoming such crises that we are facing today. And this is the reason why we are trying to talk about the reorganization of science and technology and resource supply chain for interdependent peace and prosperity. As you can imagine from this title, we're now living in a very different world than the 20th century. We thought that the 21st century will be that of a progress after finishing the 20th century's war, and we expected to have a century of peace. But with COVID-19 and pandemic, we have a lot of struggles and challenges. Now we are very much determined to overcome these issues with the suggestions made by experts. And we also have a lot of scholars and experts with the wisdom and courage to reorganize science and technology as well as the resource supply chain. I would like to express my gratitude to all the speakers and discussants. Mr. Park Chan-mo, Chairman of Korea Development Cooperation Research Institute and Networks, and Mr. Park Chan-mo, Chancellor of Pyongyang University of Science and Technology, Mr. YOON Kap-Koo, Chairman of Peace and Engineering Incorporation, and Mr. Kim Eung-se, who cannot be here today because of the COVID-19 as he lives in the U.S., is Vice President of Mizuho America Services. And also, I would like to express my gratitude to Mr. Moon Seung-il, Director of the Korea Institute of Energy Technology, and Mr. Nakayama Teruya, Chairman of KITAC in Japan. Especially Mr. Teruya has been making a lot of contributions to the development of science and technology in Northeast Asia. And this year, Mr. Lee Sangman is also now working as a moderator for this session. Last year, he was a discussant, but thank you very much for your input once again. Inter-Korean relationship has been frozen after the failure of the Hanoi summit failure in 2019. Then we are just losing our power for motivation for peace, but we still have our expectations and hopes for a better future and better chance. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Chan, Chairman of the Korea Initiative Research Institute. Now I'd like to have Professor Lee Sangman, Emeritus of Chungang University, to take the role of moderation. So thank you very much, and I'll be just welcoming you all by greeting. For the next 1 hour and a half will be spent to discuss the most important two themes for the future of the Korean Peninsula. Number one will be science and technology, because science and technology can be our focal point. Without giving solutions to that, we cannot open the door for the next round. The second one we are going to talk about today is the resource supply chain. And we have a New Korea Initiative Institute, and we are designing the future of the Korean Peninsula under the auspices of that organization. So the Korea National Strategy Institute is providing the opportunities to think about the interdependent peace and prosperity using the supply chain. So these two things will be our food for thought for the next almost 2 hours. And we are honored to have the greatest experts who have been working on these areas for the last 30 years or more. Likewise, we also have our discussants who have experiences in making policies hands-on. So I'm sure that our discussions today will be very much helpful and constructive. Both online and offline, you can raise your questions by having your voices heard or having your questions written. So since we do not have much time, we can fully utilize what we have. So always, time is our enemy, but we will do our best in order to fulfill our jobs. So we always have our future design. So I really like the name of this session today. So last year I was a discussant to the same sort of session. We were talking about the Northeast Asia's future. After attending this meeting last year, for the last year, I was quoting and citing this topic in my classes when I was teaching my students. I'm sure you will do the same thing after finishing this session today. This whole idea will be your food for thought for the next year or round. If you have the booklets, then please refer to that. At the end of the book, we have some description of what we are going to talk about. And we have Mr. Kim Eung-se, Issac Kim, who is in the United States. So he's here, so we can say hello to him, although he's not here with us. He's connected from the U.S. Do I have him? He is the Vice President of JP Morgan in the United States. We can just say hello, just to say hello. Issac has many valuable experiences so far. He has been with the Federal Bank, and he was responsible for the resources. Especially his major was financing North Korea for development. So every project is dependent upon the budget scale we have. So he must have a lot of things to share with us today because money matters. And also we have another very famous and well-known person here, Mr. Park Chan-mo, who used to be the president of the university, and he's now the chancellor and emeritus chairman. And he is also chancellor of PUST, Pyongyang University of Science and Technology. He can also give us a lot of roadmaps toward the future. And he has been always an ardent proposer, maker for many things. And metaverse education technology is one of his ideas to share today. So he is a very busy person, but still he is able to propose those ideas through papers. So I always admire his enthusiasm. And also we have Mr. Yoon Kap-Koo, chairman of IntPE Engineering Corporation. He's also a director of KNSI. He has a living history of the development of inter-Korean relations because he had a lot of initiatives, and we can get a lot of stories from him out of his experiences throughout the history. Now I'd like to introduce two discussants. Mr. Lee Heung used to work at the Ministry of Unification. He's also a spokesperson of the ministry. Therefore, you might see him as a familiar person. He's also with many other ministries, and he's now a special professor at Korea University. So he is a person of learned scholars as well as the policy makers. And also we have Mr. Heung, and he's also a Secretary General of the Peace Association of the Korean Peninsula. He has the person who opened the door for the inter-Korean relations. He is always full of new ideas for the initiatives to design the inter-Korean relations. These two discussants will be also able to give us a lot of vision and new boundaries. Now, I would like to start our session today. Mr. Kim Eung-se, Isaac Kim from the US, will be the first presenter. He will be followed by Mr. Park Chan-mo and then Mr. Yoon Kap-Koo. Time I can give you is about 20 minutes each. And discussant, you can spend 10 minutes maximum. And we will allocate some time for the Q&A after all these presentations and discussants. The first and foremost, we'd like to ask Mr. Isaac Kim.
The title of his presentation is Expanded Green Energy Infrastructure for Peace and Prosperity in South-North Inter-Korean Economic Cooperation. Thank you very much for a kind introduction. Very nice to see you all. What I'm going to talk about today in this session is the expanded green energy infrastructure for peace and prosperity in South and North intra-Korean economic cooperation. And one thing that I would like to make it clear before the start of the presentation is that I would like to touch upon briefly the current economic situation. So we have had the high expectation toward the inter-Korean economic cooperation, but somehow the current situations have dealt a blow, and also because of the Ukraine war, neighboring countries are suffering. And this by and of itself has become a very important variable that has a profound impact on the Korean Peninsula issue as well. So the importance for balancing the geopolitical tension in the Northeastern Asia region, as well as increased demand for the role of the unified Korea's economy for the global peace and prosperity, have continued to grow. In particular, the Korea's economic capability, you see that Korea has emerged as one of the G7 countries in the world. However, we are also facing various challenges, and in reviewing and taking a deeper look at these challenges that we suffer, I believe that we have to have some macroscopic view. In other words, let's say that we have to be in the air like 1,000 meters away from the surface of the Earth and try to understand what actually happened on the Earth. So we have to have a sort of the telescopic view. So currently we are facing global warming and environmental pollution that pose existential threat to humanity, and specifically within Korea, because Korea is a divided nation, and therefore we have to deal with the political instability, and we have to achieve unification. As faithful economic partners in need for mutual cooperation between South and North Korea, the immediate cooperation offers opportunities in the following areas. So we have had a painstaking lesson on this. But still, what we have to be aware of is that from where should South and North Korea can cooperate, what will be the area where we can begin and embark on the cooperation and sustain it. So we have to find out these areas of opportunities. And in this regard, the securing infrastructure for clean energy is very critical, both for South and North Korea. And this is what the current generation calls for. And also when we march toward the future, this is something that's pivotally required. And therefore, I believe that it holds a lot of importance. And also the infrastructure for clean energy is still in the R&D phase. And therefore, there are a lot of rooms of cooperation between the two Koreas. South and North Korea can engage in joint researches in this field. As mentioned by Chairman YOON, rather, it's going to be explained by Chairman YOON soon, but by establishing the so-called Northeast Asia Peace Network, we can share energy resources, and at the same time, we can make a contribution to the reduction of GHG. Currently, we are experiencing rapidly changing geopolitical complexities, and also hostile confrontation emerge between different economies. So this could pose challenges to us, but through the project to build infrastructure for clean energy, I believe that North and South Korea could be great partners, and this will contribute to peace building and prosperity in Northeast Asia as well as on the Korean Peninsula. And therefore, the efforts for inter-Korean cooperation must continue. The global macroeconomy is very interdependent, but nowadays a lot of attempts have been made to decouple from the global economies. As you know, after the Second World War, the global economy was divided into two blocks based on ideology. So one, the communist groups, and the other, the capitalism. And in the democratic capitalist nations, there have been growing interdependency. In other words, when there are country A and country B, and let's say rather than producing the same goods in both countries and consuming them, the capitalists said that we have to think about the competitive advantage. So let's say country A and country B, they have to find out the areas where they can excel, and they can help each other to improve productivity and reduce consumption price. So this has been preferred as a mechanism for capitalism, and this has been widely adopted and employed across the democratic capitalist countries. And in doing so, we thought that we could maintain peace and prosperity between nations, and cooperation partnership could also be maintained between the countries. However, changes were brewing, and one of the changes were brought by the financial crisis. And if you look at the timing of the global financial crisis, at the time when the global financial crisis broke out, the capital around the world, or let's say the economic status of countries, in fact, they already reached their peak in the human history. So the market had the largest amount of the liquidity at the time, and also countries enjoyed the highest prosperity. However, the global financial crisis dealt a significant blow to the global economy, and the whole world was shaken, and therefore restoring the global economy took a lot of efforts. So in order to overcome the economic crisis, not just the US, but also countries around the world, the major economies saw their central banks printing out a lot of money, which means this is what we call quantitative easing, which means that the countries and governments print out huge amount of money to purchase sovereign debt. So if you mint a lot of money, then this will cause inflation. However, somehow the inflation wasn't really materialized. Rather, countries were successful in controlling the inflation low. Why? Because they purchased the securities, and those who had the ownership of the securities were only limited in numbers. It wasn't something that was shared and owned by the general public. That's why the government was able to purchase sovereign debt through the quantitative easing program while keeping the inflation low. So after the World War I, the Germany experienced the hyperinflation because of this pump priming measure. But so QE and the German pump priming are basically same. But nowadays, we are living in an era where everything is just a click away. So things are not visible, a lot of changes are not visible. But anyway, with the QE, the market was overflown with liquidity, and the sovereign debt were purchased with the newly printed money, and then they went back to the coffers of the central banks. So in doing so, countries were able to keep the inflation low. However, compared to the liquidity in the market, the real wage actually stopped growing. So there is always a slight amount of inflation all the time in the market. And people are not living with the wages. But as you know, the life as you live, the living expenses tend to grow, right? Because of the inflation and also with the passage of time. So the fact that the real wages stopped growing, it means that actually there was a decrease in actual wage versus the inflation. So this has caused some dissatisfaction and frustration among the general public. And this frustration was erupted during the presidential election in 2016 in the US. As you know, the Donald Trump, he was a super rich businessman, but people started to admire the successful businessmen like Donald Trump. They envied him, and his popularity went up in this backdrop. And eventually, he was elected as president. But as you know, Donald Trump did have some idiosyncratic diplomatic policy as well as the administrative policies. And what he pursued was the isolationist and U.S. first policies. So-called America First pitch and isolationism, these are the major representative policies that explain Trump administration. And this is not just limited to U.S. only. As I said earlier, countries around the world for decades after the Second World War, they pursued the intertwined economic structures, and therefore the similar trend occurred in the UK and also the Europe. So the UK decided to leave European Union. So they did the Brexit through the public vote, and also the Conservative Labour Party won the majority to take power. And here again, the same issue can be found in the UK, that the so-called blue-collar workers, their dissatisfaction and frustration just built up over time. But fortunately in France, the progressive Macron won the presidential election, and he actually won the election over the right-wing populist Le Pen by slim margin in year 2017. Le Pen actually tried to the exit from European Union as well. So against this backdrop, 4 years have passed. So now let's take a look at the current situation. The first thing that I would like to talk about is the COVID crisis. COVID-19 affected the whole world, not just the market, and paralyzed the financial market, as well as it affected the everyday life of the general public. So everything came to a standstill. All the business activities had to be stopped. So in order to break away from this situation, in order to weather this COVID storm, the government had to intervene. And as a part of the pump priming measures, again, the trillions of dollars were poured and given directly to the general public. So with this grand subsidy scheme, the U.S. experienced the more than 9% inflation. And one of the major reasons behind climate change is the global warming, as well as the pathogen and spread of the pathogens and the environmental destruction. In other words, how did the COVID-19 virus, this pathogen, how did it come into being? So people started to be very interested in this. And the answer was that the COVID-19 broke out because of the destruction of environment by human beings. So the COVID-19, this virus, dealt a severe blow to the global world. But one benefit that we garner from the COVID crisis is that now everybody is aware of the seriousness of environmental crisis. And in order to overcome this, the AI as well as the contactless technologies have been developed at a rapid pace. Now let's take a look at politics. So China and the USSR emerged, and they actually were aspired to pursue the resurrection of the hegemony So there has been some rivalry between the Western economies and the China and Russia. You were given 20 minutes, so please be aware of the time. And we have to conclude this event at 5:30, so please be aware of the time and keep the time limit. Okay, then. I'm going to finish my presentation in 10 minutes. Would it okay? Would it be okay? Okay, let me speed up then. Among the US-based hedge fund, there is a Bridgewater Associates. This is one of the largest hedge funds in these states. And the manager of this hedge fund, he reviewed the global history and he said that the countries to predict the hegemony as well as the flow of wealth of different nations. And according to his research, and if you look at the flow of wealth in countries, you see that the UK already waned as well as Netherlands before the World War. And the US, before the arrival of the 2000s, already it actually shows the curve of declining. However, there is one country that is constantly rising, that is China. And therefore, the US has to keep China in check. And also the Russia. It tries to rebuild the renaissance that the USSR once enjoyed. So because of this fantasy, the Russia even dared to invade Ukraine. And in this situation, so we have also had this Syrian civil war, Ukraine invasion, and all these could become the stumbling blocks in our transition toward the clean energy, because this could disrupt the gas supply market. And also it created a sense of crisis for the export of the fossil fuel, which led to high inflation. For more specifics, please refer to the slide. So currently, I think we are at a very critical juncture. Whether are we going to retreat back to the fossil fuel era, or do we have to can we continue to develop clean energy? The US announced that it's going to achieve the full electrification of mobility by 2050. So all the cars will become EV, and the ICE cars will no longer be able to be produced. And also the YOON has come up with some policy direction for clean energy development, and as you know, the Saudi Arabia has also poured a lot of money to develop clean energy. However, if you look at Russia, it seems that Russia caused disruption, but there is nothing for Russia to lose. Rather, there are more to gain by causing this disruption. So here you can see some scholars, when explaining why Russia invaded Ukraine, it's because there is nothing to lose for Russia by causing this disruption in the energy market. So if you look at the Russian government expenditure every year, the in-government income, 60% of them comes from energy exploitation, and therefore Russia wants to continue to stick to the fossil fuel reliant economy. They want to maintain it. And also, with the transition to clean energy, Russia will no longer have the source of money, and its economy will be negatively affected. That's why, in order to disrupt the movement of the clean energy, some say that the Russia invaded Ukraine. So anyway, we are now at a critical juncture between the fossil fuel and based economy and clean energy based economy. And here, selecting one of them is not easy. As you know, a lot of Western countries are now suffering from high inflation because of the huge liquidity in the market. It's difficult for them to put inflation under control. So they are bending over backwards to keep the inflation low. And we have some concerns for that. But what's important here is that if you look at businesses and companies, what they need is the plan led by government, and also the government should give businesses confidence for the sustaining of the programs. Otherwise, businesses cannot predict the future and cannot run business. So here we are witnessing both challenges and opportunities. So what's important here is that we should not give up on our journey toward the clean energy. Otherwise, it's going to cause an irreversible environmental contamination and destruction. We also have to develop the financial market to pursue renewable clean energy technology innovation and market expansion. There is a securitization, one of the derivatives. So there are diverse types of the securities, and securitization means that the securities are pulled together and sold back to investors. So this technology or financial technique can be utilized for clean energy development projects. Then what we can expect is that so there should be an investment to secure infrastructure for green energy, but we can reduce the investment cost significantly with this technique. And also from investors' perspective, they can have a very stable source of income and returns. So it is beneficial to everyone. But one hindrance here is that it is unproven, or let's say clean energy. It has a very short history, so still it is an unproven technology. And in this aspect, for let's say the next 20 years or 30 years down the road, can investment continue to generate returns? And with this matter, I think that there are still big question mark and high suspicion. But the basic science for clean energy development have to be studied and researched. And also, in order for securitization to thrive, we have to come up with the appropriate legislative framework, and financial sector should pay attention to this issue. and we also have to revise and find the institutional framework, then I believe that the future for securitization is very bright. So here you can see the conclusion. In the US, there is a saying that Solar City, which became merged by Tesla recently, Elon Musk made an investment to establish a huge PV-powered complex and facilities called Solar City. And in order to exit the investment, he made an attempt of the securitization. But then things become against the Elon Musk's expectation, and eventually the Solar City got merged by Tesla. So that's why this technology has to be proven. And I think that once the solar and other renewable energy technology is proven for its efficacy and effects, then I think these kind of concerns among investors will be removed. So let me now conclude my presentation. We are now approaching the end of the era of the fossil energy, and the world has the limited resources, and the global warming and environmental hazard are the major culprit behind the climate change that we experience. And therefore, clean energy is something that we must go forward. And also as people who want peace building, we have to promote the co-development, co-management, and sharing the benefit for peaceful coexistence and prosperity. So we have to secure technological resources to promote co-prosperity for everyone. And also through the peace network, we have to establish the bridge between North and South Korea. Also, by making sure that the South and North Korea participate in joint development projects, we can seek for the peaceful coexistence and the eventual unification of the two Koreas. So I think that in the future we will live in an era of electricity. Everything will be electrified, and EV, hydrogen cars are now emerging. So in this situation, let's say the electricity resources that can be generated from peace network, by using that, we can achieve a lot of things. And these are not just a wishful thinking. Rather, I believe that it is an idea that can be materialized with a lot of possibilities. And also, we have to learn from Germany's case. I think we have a lot to learn from Germany's case. For example, in 1969, German Chancellor Franz Schumann made a proposal, and at the time, the US and NATO were at loggerheads, but eventually the Germany won, and that was good for peace. And also, even in the midst of the confrontation against the USSR, Germany made it clear that this is not to cause confrontation, nuclear to nuclear, against Russia, and it said that the trade is very important to win this battle of nuclear weapon, and also to achieve prosperity for everyone. At the time, Germany received the supply of gas from Russia, and also at the time, Germany provided the steel pipe for the connection of the gas pipe with Russia. That's why they were able to create a trade relationship with the USSR. And if you look at Germany's aspiration for unification, In fact, the first person that predicted the USSR collapse was the Germany's foreign minister. And so he persuaded the Prime Minister Kohl. And in fact, they made a significant contribution to the withdrawal of the Russian troops from East Germany. They even provided the settlement cash to the Russian troops who returned to their countries. So this shows the ardent wish of the German people and also how they put this wish into action. So in that sense, I think that we can learn a lot from Germany's case. So this will conclude my presentation. If you have any question, then we'll take that later. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much. The code has now changed from red to green. So we're living in a green technology world. So thank you very much for giving me a lot of good thought. But I'm sorry that I was not able to give you enough time since time is limited here. So if you have any questions, you can just raise your hand later down the road when we have the discussion. And also you can just key in your questions through the online channel. Now I would like to have Mr. Park Chat-mo for the next presentation.
메타버스 교육 시스템을 구축하게 되겠습니다. 부탁드리겠습니다. 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. Because of the time constraint, I think that I really have to speed up. So why the peace, prosperity, and coexistence is important? It's because, as you may be well aware, we experienced the Japanese colonial rule, and in 1945, we attained the independence, but at the time there was a lot of confusion. At the time, I was only 10 years old, so I wasn't really aware of what happened. But then in 1948, the South and North Korea had their own government established. So in South Korea, on August 15th, the South Korean government was established. But then right after that, the North Korean government was also established. And then in 1950, the Korean War broke out. And then 3 years after the outbreak of the war, the armistice agreement was signed. North Korea didn't call this agreement armistice agreement. Rather, they said that they won this war. So after the Korean War and after the signing of the armistice agreement, all kinds of communication channels were shut down between the two Koreas. One of the scholar named John Linton, he is the professor in the Medical College of Yonsei University, and he visited the place where the armistice agreement was signed. So if you visit that place, you can see the armistice agreement in Korean and English. And also here you see the 38th demarcation line. And the North Korean soldiers do not allow the visitors from South Korea, even not taking a seat there. I have been visiting North Korea for about 20 years. And before the physical unification, what we have to achieve is peaceful coexistence and prosperity. So this is something that I realized during my stay in Germany in the 1980s. So without psychological unification, there should be no physical unification. Otherwise, there will be only confusion. That's why I now claim that the peaceful coexistence and prosperity must be achieved first before we see the full-blown physical unification. And therefore, in order to achieve the peace unification, we have to change the armistice to the end of war. Some are interpreting this as a call to withdraw the U.S. troops, but I don't think that the U.S. are going to leave Korea. Troops are going to leave Korea anyway because of China. And as you know, the military expenditure and the defense budget will decrease if we achieve peaceful coexistence. And I believe that the order that banned the U.S. citizens from visiting North Korea should be removed. So I think this is a serious mistake the U.S. government made, and it must be removed. And liaison office must be established among the U.S., South, and North Korea, and the communication channels have to be resumed in order to achieve peaceful coexistence. So in that regard, metaverse, I think, can be utilized. As you may be well aware, the metaverse has been utilized for various inter-Korean exchanges and cooperation programs. I was invited by North Korea's Kim-Chek Engineering University. So I visited the North Korea a few years ago, and at the time we had a seminar on virtual reality, and this virtual reality is actually the foundational world of metaverse. This is the time even when the word metaverse was not coined yet. But here you can see, in this photo, you can see me, and next to me is the science officer, as well as the director of the Information Technology Center in North Korea. So I did the lecture, and I was very disappointed because I thought that the students are going to listen to my lecture, but all the participants were only the professors and deans of the science and IT departments. And also there were even professors from the humanities department, so they may not be able to understand what I speak. And when I went to Singapore, there was a Condex Asia, and Pyongyang Informatics Center was the only organization from North Korea that participated in that convention. So I asked the North Korean officer to bring me to the research center of PIC, and I provide the same lecture to 120 researchers there. And all of them paid undivided attention. They were very, very attentive, great listeners, and they also asked a lot of questions. So I proposed another idea, that maybe we can have a joint research project between PIC and Pohang University. So some raised the suspicion that this project is about the military and defense. So I reassured them this is not about military at all. Rather, it's about education, medical science, and also architecture. So I submitted the proposal, and in 2001, I got the approval of the project. Because the director of PIC, Mr. Choi, said that he could not give me the approval, and he had to report this to his boss. So anyway, we received the approval, and so I brought some researchers to North Korea and stayed in North Korea for about 1 week. And we worked with North Korean researchers together. So during the day, we worked together, and during night, we went to karaoke and drank alcohol. And in fact, the North Korean researchers liked the researchers from Pohang Engineering College. So this is the result or the deliverable from the project. So this is the 3D CAD system created by PIC. And so we compared this 3D CAD and the AutoCAD. AutoCAD is a globally famous CAD program by Autodesk, and you can see that the performance is almost at par, almost equivalent, and even when it comes to the design of the building. In fact, this North Korean product, Sanak 3.0, was even better than AutoCAD. So while doing this joint research, what we developed at the time was this, that we developed the software for construction. So let's say that the architect come up with a drawing, and before construction starts, they can simulate the construction process in the computer, and they can walk through all the places that they're going to build in the virtual world in order to find out any kind of design errors and mistakes. And then they correct design errors again inside the virtual world. In other words, before the start of the construction, all the errors are identified and corrected. So this virtual reality technology is something that the Pohang Engineering College provide, and CAD technology is something developed by PIC. So the two institutions joined hands together to come up with this deliverable. It's not really readable, but here you see that he wears the head-mounted display, and with the use of head-mounted display, he can find out all the design errors in the simulated world, in the virtual world. And so North Korea holds the national competition every year. Even during the Audio Smarts period, they didn't stop hosting this event. And in fact, he won this competition in that year. And his case was published and introduced by one of the major magazines in North Korea called Joseon. And the article didn't mention that it's the project that came out of the partnership with South Korea, but they at least mentioned that it's the result of the international project. And this is the annex building of PIC, rather the Pyongyang Engineering College. And again, this PIC CAD program was used to come up with the design for this new building. So here you can see that this program has already been commercialized. It cannot be sold and exported to overseas market, but within the North Korean market, it has become a commercial software. And so one of the PUST researchers visited the North Korea and taught the North Korean researchers. In fact, they are very arduous learners, and so we didn't ask him to do so, but they developed on their own this software. So here you see the dolphin floating in the sea, and also the people playing golf. These images are realized in 3D. So with the HMD, you can actually see a very immersive image of these pictures. So they produce these excellent outcomes. And then we established the Hana Program Center in Dandong, China. And not just the PIC, the Kim Il-sung University researchers and Kim Tech Engineering College researchers all joined for the ceremony. And I provide the lecture. And here you can see their achievement with the 3D graphics. It's their drawings. And as you know, for the CAD, the high GPU is required, and usually the US or Korea, we have a great GPU systems. However, North Korea does not have the enough GPU to produce this kind of great CAD design, and therefore they have to exercise and use their creativity to produce something out of like resources. So in that sense, I believe that at least when it comes to creativity, because their hardware is so poor, so at least for the creativity alone, I think the North Koreans are better than other countries in many ways. And also when there is an academic conference between the two Koreas, usually we hosted that in a third country, either in Japan or China. But I insisted to host this event on the Korean Peninsula. So after 1.5 years of the persuasion, we were able to have this academic conference in Pyongyang. So from April 5th to 6th of the year 2006, we held this academic conference. And during the preliminary session, I and the president of the Kim-Taek University served as speakers. And we had the several parallel sessions on IT, NTPT, and environment technology. And we had a lot of preceding papers, but the actual presentations were made by a few speakers. It's because some Japanese scholars wanted to go to North Korea to join the conference, but then the Japanese government blocked them. So only some business entrepreneurs were able to join the event, whereas the scholars who were scheduled to deliver lectures in the conference could not join and could not go to North Korea. Anyway, I think that this academic conference was meaningful in many ways because it was the first science and technology conference between the two Koreas that was held on the Korean Peninsula, and also it opened a new opportunity to activate and promote exchanges for science and technology. It also contributed greatly to the creation of human network between the two Koreas. So at the time we agreed that we have to hold this kind of event regularly, but because of some external situations, we were not able to continue. Now let's take a look at the North Korea's efforts to achieve prosperity through the Pyongyang University of Science and Technology Education. We have to help North Korea achieve prosperity. Only that will be able to reduce the cost for unification. Otherwise, we may have to pour huge amount of money to assist North Korea and resuscitate its economy. And the first vision for PUST is the global university beyond imagination. So what they want was the world-class university, or top-notch, just like the Pohang University, where I served as the president at the time. And when North Korea asked me to make the PUST as good as the Pohang University, at the time I said that it's impossible because North Korea does not have the Park Tae-jun or the CEO of POSCO, who made huge investment to the development of the Pohang University. And another request that the PUST made to me was that they want international school, so they want to send their students to overseas. And also it's a Christianity-based university, so their mission was to teach the love of Jesus to students and cultivate the sense of love, honesty, respect, and so on. And at first they only had the male students because the dormitory was only for male. but then later it became the co-ed institute. So from year 2015, they received female students as well. And they built a separate dormitory for female students. And if you look at its development over the past 10.5 years, at first there were only 100 undergraduate students, but increased to 550. And also the number of faculty increased from 20 to 126, including 60 US citizens. But then later they were banned from visiting North Korea, so they could not go to North Korea. So currently they are teaching online. And here you can see the photos of faculty of PUST. And 60 of them, as I said earlier, are US citizens. And they follow the US academic year, so the semester begins in September. And also all the faculty members are Christian. So, and their mission is to narrow the gap of technology between the two Koreas by cultivating science and technology talent and by commercializing knowledge and industrialization. And as you know, in year 2021, North Korea, for the first time in its history, submitted the YOON VNR. YOON VNR is to take stock upon the progresses that each country has made in terms of SDG. So the UN asked the member countries to submit SDG report called VNR, but it's not mandatory. It's voluntary national report or national review. And North Korea never submitted this report, but then in year 2021, they submitted VNR for the first time. And among the 17 items, 5 of them are something that the PUST could contribute, including the crop production, public health care, and internationalization of the education system and purification of beverages, as well as energy issues. So these are the items that PUST contributed a lot. Now let's take a look at how to establish the multilateral metaverse education system. Metaverse is beyond time and space to create the world where reality and virtual reality can coexist. Especially after the COVID crisis, metaverse becomes very popular, and VR, AR, and AI are employed to realize metaverse. And North Korea is pretty strong in AI because they study math a lot from very early childhood. And also the IQ, imagination, interaction, and immersion are utilized to establish the metaverse system. So here you can see some new paradigm emerging for human-computer interface. So in the past, the computer and the human are situated in different worlds, but now human beings are located in a computerized VR-based world. And Chairman Kim Jong-un also encouraged the use of 3D and virtual reality. And this HTC, this is manufactured in Taiwan. It used to be very, very expensive. Nowadays, its price is only $500. So North Korea import a lot of HTC and teach children with a virtual reality. And also they teach them how to make use of these virtual reality technologies to develop various applications. And here you can see the curriculum and the syllabus, my syllabus for the VR training program in PUST. So I teach virtual reality system, rendering the virtual world, interacting with the virtual world, and so on. So this is something that I teach. And as for the application, usually the biomedical and the education are the focus. And this is the deliverables that students produce from project. And this project is called Virtual Stage for Public Speaking. In other words, the people here can receive online training on public speech in the metaverse world. And this is again the student project called Hip Hop Dancer. And Route 66 in the picture, this is from the US. And also there are 3 people at the bottom of the photo. And they are dancing. So if you click the person on the left, then the people at the center showed some actions. And if you click the person in the middle, then again different motion or different dance is played. And this is the conclusion from that student report. And I highlighted this in red color, that by learning such things in practice, we could turn them into capital for future struggles. So for them, monetization is very important. So a lot of great students there, rather than choosing to go to university, they want to earn money. Anyway, there are a lot of advantages of the metaverse education system. First of all, you don't have to be bound by time and space. And even a difficult learning can be made just like playing game. And also it is physically safe because it is contactless, and one teacher can teach a lot of students simultaneously. And also through the multilateral joint development between the US and South and North Korea, we can contribute to peaceful coexistence and prosperity for everyone. But still, there are also some cons and problems that with the digital gap, it could widen the gap between the different classes, and also it can be abused and manipulated if the participants do have low ethics. And so North Koreans, they really want unification. In fact, I think their wish is stronger than South Koreans. So we have to provide them with the education on peaceful coexistence and unification. And for this, I think metaverse and virtual reality can be great option. So I sincerely hope that we are going to declare the end of war as early as possible and see the peace treaty be signed and liaison office resume between the 2 Koreas. And with that, thank you very much.
Well, thank you so much. Well, within such a short time, you were able to convey us a lot of things that we didn't know before. What is emphasized by these scholars and also technical engineers recently is about the VNR. So if you look at the details of the VNR, they had a lot of honest comments here. And you have given us the succinct summary of the ideas inside the VNR. And they are very frank to say that they learned a lot. And also, so far in your lifetime, you have achieved a lot of things, and that is the culmination of what you have achieved so far. What was interesting is that actually they were just making the realization of a hip-hop dancer on screen, and that was really amazing. This kind of technology in the North Korea would be able to change their culture in the end. So, and also you said that they're very money-oriented. So, although I'm not an economist, so I am wondering if they are really changing for the money and for the capitalism. So if the future of North Korea can be based on these changes made in the technology, and then engineering and science. Thank you very much for your input. The problem here is that we are really stricken with time, so I should have had 2 hours allocated for this, but we have less than 30 minutes to finish this session. We cannot extend our time period for this session, so we have to finish maximum 5:10. So we have no less than 30 minutes, but we have one more presentation and 2 discussions. I know that we have a lot of experts here, so if you are finished very early, then we call it world-renowned scholar. And if you're not finished with your own time, you are called experts. So I want you to be called as prominent scholars rather than just experts. And Mr. Yoon, you are the last speaker. I know that you are really having a hard time in controlling your time allocation. You did the same problem last year, I know. So this year is a repetition of your problems that you experienced before. I'd like to ask you to spend as little as possible, like 5 to 10 minutes, to finish your presentation. Thank you. Well, thank you so much. Issac Kim and Mr. Park Chan-mo gave us very good talks about what they have achieved. Also, we have Mr. Byun and Mr. Lee as our moderator. All these people are actually the ones we believe are making spiritual conversation. When we wanted to put the title of this session, we didn't have to discuss a lot to have the formulation of this topic, because we were so naturally deciding upon this name. We called it Reorganization of Science and Technology and Resource Supply Chain for the Interdependent Peace and Prosperity. Reorganization means that we have to go beyond time and space. And superconnection is also the keyword that we are living with nowadays. And this title of my talk is Establishment of Integrated Resource Peace Network Using Hyper-Connected ICT. This Korea Global Forum for Peace is actually making the connection of time and space in one venue like this. We have so many people getting together in one place, listening to each other, and also talking over the items. Also, questions can be asked and answered. It's important to keep the time, I know. Therefore, I would like to just skip many of the pages I prepared. Let me just do some exercises. I know you have all your cell phones. Please turn it on, and I know that you're using the Google a lot. You have the Chrome or Google, whatever OS you have. Please take your cell phones out and click it. Then on the top page, there is a tab. You have to key in something. If you want to search something, you either put address or the name. Then I know that we're all limited. Why don't you just key in the word my name, YOON Kap-Koo, in Korean language. Now, if it is no PC, it's okay. So please search the keyword of my name, YOON Kap-Koo. YOON, Kap, and Koo. Now you double click it or enter it. Then what do you see now? Anyone who has searched it, nothing happens, then I don't have to be here because I don't deserve to have this attention from you as a speaker. Do you see anything under my name? Yes, it says speakers YOON Kap-Koo and KGFP. It means that I'm here in Korea Global Forum for Peace. That was the first result. And if you just key in Park Chan-mo, more results will be there. And the YOON Kap-Koo plus peace and then you will have this results of more than 10,000. So anytime you can get all this information. And then the more word choices you have on the tab, you can get very accurate information. That is the combination of time and space I'm referring to. Nothing is impossible here. The fastest thing in the world is time. Time is always fleeting. I said we are doing spiritual conversation amongst ourselves. It means that we are having the conversations at the speed of time and light, and sometimes we're faster than the time. And we can also have the conversation with God, the supernature. My conclusion has been made already. It means everything is possible. Nothing is impossible. Peace and prosperity are possible. We can do it. That's the conclusion I would like to draw on today. The next thing I would like to talk about is how we can do that. For example, we talked about the sovereignty, and we talked about the stream of the money and the flow of the trend. So if you look at my slide here, and it talks about the third industrial revolution, and we call it also the green industrial revolution, and also it's intelligent network. So this is a result of my presentation in 2011 or 2007 when I was invited by the National Assembly. I talked about the microgrid and super connectivity at that time. So all the renowned people are the results of the search there. And they were talking about the third industrial revolution. We want to live a long life as human beings. And the only way doing so is to go back to the low carbon society. Because of the pollution and environmental havoc, we are almost reaching the end of the world. And if you see the green lines here, we have the Chinese language and Chinese character and English. Now, because we had the audience who were from China, that's why we used Chinese language there. And the second picture from the top is Mr. Rifkin, and Rifkin also made the lecture there. So he was having that lecture about the leading the way to a green energy era. And the next one is me. So I had my presentation titled World Views in the Age of Energy and Environment. So I was talking about the green technology and the environment. The last one, which is after me, was making the presentations on the ecological modernization, new paradigm containing all of those technologies. So although your booklet doesn't mention this, I would like to share my past experience of being a lecturer. So this is about my wish to have the integration of the society. Do you remember what President YOON mentioned in his speech for the Independence Day on August 15th? Do you remember the word he proposed? He mentioned that he was proposing audacious initiatives. And what does audacious mean? The audacious means full suite of reorganization. Reorganization means they're going to change the course of the knowledge and information and the stream of the times. So if they are successful, they can also lead to the unification of North and South Korea that way. What we are trying to do in this presentation is that we titled as the vision for unification and inter-Korean relations in the transitional era. What does transitional mean here? So we'll talk about it later. And then we wanted to use the word of reorganization of science and technology and resource supply chain for interdependent peace and prosperity. We didn't have to spend a lot of time until we reached this title. We didn't have to talk more than just simple exchanges of ideas. We were not very flexible to use these words. So if you read these titles, you can imagine what we're trying to say. So we have the next title, Beyond Faction and Monopolism. And then the next title we chose was Establishing a Metaverse Education System. So education matters. What would we do about education? And Mr. Park used to teach at PUST, Pyongyang University of Science and Technology. He was representing the U.S. when he was serving there, and he was also taken his job away because of the soured relationship between North Korea and the U.S. And what would he do about it once he's just taken out of it and they have to do something else? Also, I have my own title, Establishment of Integrated Resource Space Network Using Hyperconnected ICT. So I wanted to say the using hyperconnected ICT. The hyperconnected is the keyword for the current times. So I had a lot of hyperconnections using the links here. I gave you a lot of links, and all of you, I asked you to test your links. So all of this technology is about the connectivity. The highest rank as engineers in Korea is called as the engineering expert. And I'm one of them. And also, if you have these experiences, you can recall that you have done a lot of work. Because I was a science engineer and I was working very hard in my lifetime. And also, I was asked to send my own researches to the relevant organizations. And also, I was involved in the Catholic organization, and I was also working very hard to have some programs there. And I invited one day to have a seminar. The title was the Inter-Korean Relationship and the Unification Using the Technology. And that was hosted by the Catholic organization Issac. And they wanted to have the peace and unification in the Korean peninsula. And that was 2001, and they wanted to use a lot of resources based on the religion at that time. And I was a presenter, and Mr. Byun was a discussant. At that time, what we covered was the wish of the displaced families when they want to be united amongst themselves. They wished reunion of the families, and that reunion was delayed and delayed because of the political situations at that time. And then they were mostly linked with the North Korean people, and the North Korean families were invited to a third place, and they were all in tears when they finally were reunited. The purpose of having this presentation today is, as you see from your slide, from your screen, is for the sake of peace and prosperity. Here, whose peace and whose prosperity? Well, we talk about the North and South Korean people for the subject of peace and prosperity, but I advise you that it should be starting from you. You should be in peace and you should be in prosperity. If people like you are combined together, that will reach the status of the whole peace and prosperity. That's why I said in the first line in this slide, for me. So it should start from yourselves, and then it can go to the family, world, and it's actually connected to the universe and space. I didn't type that word in the slide, but that's the all hyper-connected. One word is hovering in my mind right now, so I have to speak it now. There was a time when I had a guest who was very old at that time. He was staying in my house a long time ago. And also, there was a person who actually had the visit by when the Pope was in Korea. So he asked me to stay in his house for a couple of days, and I finally accepted his invitation and I visited his house. And then actually the house was red carpeted when I entered. So I would receive the reception of red carpet. And then I actually saw a picture of the astronaut who was on the surface of the moon as a spaceman. And then he said that it was the anniversary of the human beings to go to the moon when we took a picture. So I carried the picture for a long time, but I didn't bring it here today to show you. So actually I started my presentation with conclusion first, so it's okay to stop anytime soon. And this picture can be shown to you in order to have the circulation of the resources. In March 2000, we had the ceremony, and it's called Peace Network Korea. At that time, this organization, Peace Network Korea, was launched, and that person on the podium was CEO of Kap-Koo. He's a very honest guy, and I know that he is a friend of Mr. Park as well. The subtitle at that time was the connection of the electric power grid and power system between North and Korea. So if we have the connection of the power grid between North and South Korea, we can do the next step. Kap-Koo was responsible for the distribution and transmission and collected money. And Kap-Koo was in the center of everything. What we decided at that time was to separate the businesses of Kap-Koo. Deregulation was the next step, so they can boost the competition among players. Then afterwards, we can do the connection. The connection should happen beyond Korea, so China and Russia should have been included in our connected transmission and distribution. And there were candidates for a presidential election at the time, Mr. Kim Dae-jung and Mr. Lee Hwa-chang. As a presidential candidate, Mr. Kim Dae-jung also included the connection of the power grid in his campaign, and then he was elected. Also later, he also awarded Nobel Peace Prize after a series of these activities. And I'm sure that all of you can go that way once again. You're living in a hyper-connected society. I would like to call you as pilgrimages to this interconnected world. So Peace Network for Resources can be done by all these people in their pilgrimages to the new untrodden path. I call you pilgrimages. So that has been my presentation. I'll be waiting for your questions. Thank you.
감사합니다. 우리
Thank you very much. What I felt from the Chairman Yoon's speech is that I think he's the person who can turn the dream into vision and also eventually into reality. So with regards to the integrated peace network, I actually heard about this decades ago. And at first, I had a lot of suspicion whether it's really possible. But then I saw how Chairman Yoon turns this dream into reality. And also, I felt very grateful that I could be part of his pilgrimage that he talked about. And because of the time constraint, the Chairman Yoon didn't really follow the presentation slide. So maybe later, as an assignment, homework, you can read his slide later. Now we are going to hear from our discussant. So the Professor Lee first. Thank you very much for inviting me to this great seminar, and I really enjoyed the 3 presentations. In particular, President Kim and also the Dr. Park. They talked about the program that they jointly developed with Pyongyang, and Chairman YOON talked about the hyperconnected society. Because of the time constraint, I cannot raise any questions. But within this short period of time, what I'm going to talk about is that because the theme of this session is the peaceful coexistence and prosperity. You know, the Korea is now technically at war, and we have gone through a lot of differences and conflicts between the 2 Koreas, and we have to overcome these differences and enjoy peaceful coexistence to aim for the eventual unification. This is something that everyone, not just on the Korean peninsula, but around the world, wish for. And the South Korea, according to its own theory and principle, it pursued the confederation system for unification, and they emphasized the importance of exchanges and cooperation. And then on August 15th of this year, during the National Independence Day, President Yoon talked about the audacious initiative, and this is to link the North Korea denuclearization, economy, and the quality of life for North Korean citizens. But we haven't got any response from North Korea. So in this situation, we have to find out the common denominators where we can start the inter-Korean cooperation. And in the sense that these 3 presentations are very meaningful and significant. But going beyond, I think all these proposals have to be accepted by North Korea anyway, in order to see the tangible fruits of the cooperation. And also North Korea is now under sanction because of the nuclear program. So we have to find something that can be acceptable both to South and North Korea in order to promote cooperation. And this is something that the South Korean government should undertake, but maybe the 3 presenters can give more idea about how to realize this in a specific and actual manner.
Well, thank you very much. I'm sorry that you have to spend such a short time. But if you read, audience, his paper for the discussion, we can have further understanding. Last but not least, I'd like to ask you to have your discussion and then the closing remark. Well, thank you very much. Issac Kim used to be vice president of JP Morgan, and now he is actually the vice president of Mizuho America Services LLC that he is running. So JP Morgan, his past experience, he's now working at Mizuho America Services. Now, I'm not allowed to speak longer than expected, as I understand, because of the time constraint. I'd like to advise you to read my paper for this discussion. I raised 3 questions to Issac and also Mr. Park. And also to Mr. Yoon, I had 1 question. So I had altogether 5 questions, 3 to Issac and 1 to Mr. Yoon and 1 to Mr. Park. I do not have the luxury of getting the answers right now. If we have our questions online, we have to entertain their questions. Since we are living in the hyperconnectivity world, we haven't reached the point where we are able to read their questions simultaneously at the same time here. So we cannot see their questions coming up right now. But anyway, I have heard a very good presentation, so I don't have anything to add. And Issac said that we are reaching the end of the fossil fuel energy. But because of the Ukraine war by Russia, we see the tendency of going back to the past by opening up some of the fossil fuel plant operation. So one of my questions was related to that, but I don't have time to get the answer. To Mr. Park, I also had a question regarding metaverse, because we had our bias that North Korea is just a closed country. But you said that the Because the lack of hardware, they were creative enough to complement the situation using software, and they are moving toward a very new, unadventured path. And other countries might follow what they are. So if we have the good collaboration between North and South Korea, we can complement each other. For example, the infrastructure in hardware in the South and software in the North. Then we can lead the Northeast Asia at that time, and also we can reach beyond the region to lead the world. Maybe we can together open the new window of science and technology. We can lead the level of science and technology to the next level. So my question that I intended to Mr. Park was as follows. The people in the authorities in the North and the scientists and engineers in the North, how much do they know about South Korea, the level of the technology in here in South Korea, and how much are they willing to express their wishes to Korea if they have? So that was my question I couldn't raise. And to Mr. Yoon, I also had my own question. He talked about the audacious initiative presented by the YOON administration. Practically speaking, after this administration was taking power, we have a new system of, my question to you is there any new system of making an association for the engineers in Korea? So is there any movement to create such an organization? We extended our time frame by 10 minutes, but we already spent 11 minutes. I don't want to give inconvenience to anyone here, including our staff here. But we are almost at the end of our whole session of the KGFP 2022. Since we are just wrapping up all the sessions for Korea Global Forum for Peace, I'd like to now ask Mr. Lee as our moderator to wrap up. Yes. Well, why don't you just wait one more year to get your answers heard? So next year we will meet again. The 2023 Korea Global Forum for Peace will give you answers. And please give them a big hand for their contribution. And thank you very much for your participation to the audience. Thank you.